Greetings and salutations, young true believers. So I want to talk to you today about this dispute between Marcus Lammenranta and Michael Huemer. And Huemer, in his response to Lammenranta on page 56 of the Problems in Epistemology and Metaphysics text, he argues that my dispute with Lammenranta, the central dispute, is a semantic one, not a substantive one. So we have to cash out what that means. Huemer argues, and I think he's essentially right here, that the dispute is about what the word know means in English, right? As Huemer interprets Lammenranta, right? Lammenranta disagrees with most philosophers about whether a situation, say I'm a brain in a vat, right, or whether or not I have hands, right, is correctly described with the sentence, I know that I have hands. Most philosophers think I know I have hands is true when they've ruled out all relevant possibilities to having hands. Relevant being the operative word there, right? So again, we talked about this a little bit in previous videos, but what's the standard of proof to which you want to aspire here? If our standard of proof is, as Lammenranta would have it, beyond all possible doubt, then we're in a really bad situation. We can't prove anything beyond all possible doubt. And indeed, that's what Huemer thinks that Lammenranta is arguing for. A sentence like, I have hands is true if and only if I've ruled out all logically possible alternatives. And that just simply can't be done, right? So Huemer is saying, look, we need to rule out all relevant possible alternatives, right? And in this situation, right, we're asking for a standard of proof, which is simply beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So, okay, I assert I have a hand. What would be a reasonable alternative to that? You lost your hands in war, and you are under the influence of drugs, and you're hallucinating that you have hands. You're doing some LSD or some very powerful drug that makes you hallucinate that you have hands, right? Or you have an artificial set of hands, a la Luke Skywalker and Return of the Jedi, and you think they're natural hands, right? I mean, again, you see how far out on the limb you have to go to entertain this kind of notion, which is why Huemer responds that, look, this is a semantic dispute. We're talking about what knowledge means, what the English verb phrase to know means, right? And what it doesn't mean is that I have to rule out every single possible alternative, logical alternative to a purported case of knowledge to say that I know it, right? So what you need to be wary of, and I think we've talked about this in a previous video as well, but it bears repeating. There's a logical fallacy, right? The perfectionist fallacy, whereby either I can assert something with 100% certainty, right? Or this purported item of knowledge will solve any given problem I might have completely, or I should just abandon it, right? But that rules out the situation that we actually find, right, ourselves in the everyday world. In the everyday, what we call the real world, right, we rarely ever have absolute certainty, right? In fact, we almost never have it, right? Someone might argue in trivial cases, 2 + 2 = 4, and that's important, right? But I need not aspire to that level of certainty to assert that the forecast says there's a 90% chance of rain, so I'll take an umbrella, right? I also don't need to aspire to that level of certainty to look at an orange piece of food matter and say this is a carrot, it'll nourish me, right? I don't have to consider the possibility that it's, I'm hallucinating a carrot. In other words, right, and this is what Lammenranta meant when he quoted that Hume passage at the end of his article. If we follow out the dogmatic view, or excuse me, not the dogmatic view, but the skeptical view, what Huemer calls the global skeptic view, the idea that we have absolutely no knowledge, we're just paralyzed. We can't act. We can't act in any possible way. And that is just unsatisfactory. We make do with a useful approximation of reality, right? And this is what John Dewey, the great American pragmatist philosopher, was talking about when he said, we need to abandon this obsession that humanity has with certainty, because we rarely ever get certainty, right? Um, and we want certainty. It's an understandable desire. I wish I could know with certainty that this course of action that I've chosen to embark upon will be successful, will lead to good ends, and you just can't have that, right? And this is, on Dewey's view, why we created gods. We wanted to have something to which we could make appeal, that we could satisfy, that would guarantee us certainty. It leads to fanaticism, right? We just, as he puts it, we have to embrace contingency, right? And this is where Huemer on page 59, right? He writes, top of the page, compare how things work with the following familiar words. Old. Exactly how long must a thing have existed for it to count as old? There's no single precise answer to that. It depends on what the thing is. For example, old cities are older than old shoes, right? Large. Exactly how many cubic millimeters must an object occupy to count as large? Again, there is no single precise answer to this. It depends on what kind of thing we're talking about. For example, large houses are larger than large cakes. No. Exactly how certain must P, let's say Pete, right, be in order to qualify as known, right? Let's say that the proposition is, Pete knows that there's a solar eclipse today, right? It depends on the proposition, and even for a given proposition, there's no precise cutoff. But again, it would not be a superior semantic theory to claim that nothing is ever known, or that only things with the highest possible certainty are truly known, right? We don't need to have what the philosopher Thomas Nagel calls God's eye view, absolute knowledge that cannot possibly be subject to any defeaters, to act, right? And this is what Huemer means at the bottom of 59. He says, skepticism has no practical benefit, right? The Lammenranta thinks it does, because he thinks it helps us avoid being dogmatic, right? It helps us avoid dismissing alternatives to our beliefs, right? So, again, with Huemer, I think, what good does it even do us to entertain the global skeptic view? It doesn't get us anything, and in fact, it just paralyzes us in our belief. So we're much better off asserting, yes, I have hands. No, I'm not a brain in a vat. I have no good reason to think I'm a brain in a vat. And again, this is what is meant when philosophers assert that a difference has to make a difference to be a difference. If it doesn't make a tangible difference in your life, this is the pragmatist point, then the view simply isn't worth holding.